Who knew what and when? Christie's Bridgegate enters a new phase, and tonight we know most of the people and groups now under subpoena in the Traffic is Payback scandal. We will review how they connect to the scandal and the governor and what they may say under oath. And then Obama begins to tinker with the NSA and how they troll for data. But with some complaining, the president is neutering the spy agency and others saying he's not really changing anything. Is the president's proposal more show than real action? And later, the working life. From those in the middle class to those just barely scraping by and those who just aren't. We talk about how work feels harder than ever. And tonight we speak with the New York Times columnist telling stories that profile today's American workers. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to RFL. I am Richard French, and thank you so much for joining us this Friday evening, January 17th. Well, drip, drip, drip. You know how these kind of investigations go. Of all the parts of the so-called Bridgegate that are so damaging to Christie and his hopes to become the Republican nominee in 2016, perhaps the most problematic is the slow drip of information, and that it will be months, if not even longer, before this mess finally resolved. Now, even if the governor is guilty of nothing more than bad oversight and bad hiring, which is what we already know, that drip, 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 it certainly continued today. And for more, we turn to senior political correspondent Andrew Whitman.
And Rich, this has been a bunch of different information that we've been processing throughout the day. A number of different sources, the Star Ledger in New Jersey, the Record, which has been right at the forefront of this story, each releasing bits and drips, as you will, of who received these subpoenas today and who didn't. We also got confirmation later in the day from the legislative committee that has actually issued these subpoenas on some of them. So we have some of the names. We don't have all of them yet. But, you know, last night at this time, we were reporting subpoenas had been issued by New Jersey's legislature's Special Committee on Investigations in the bridge mess. 20 subpoenas in all, 17 to individuals, 3 to organizations. Tonight, RFL has names, 17 in total, 15 individuals, 2 of the groups now under subpoena. The subpoenas all fall into 3 groups: the Christie re-election campaign, the Port Authority, and the Christie administration. First up, the administration, and the most obvious subpoena of all, former Deputy Chief of Staff Bridget Kelly. She is the author of the infamous "Time for Some Traffic Problems in Fort Lee" email. She received a subpoena today. So did Michael Druniak, Christie's longtime spokesman, both in campaigns and in Trenton as well. Also, Charles McKenna has been subpoenaed. He is Christie's chief legal counsel. Kevin O'Dowd, who is Chris Christie's first-term chief of staff and his nominee for attorney general. It's an appointment that is now seemingly on hold because of these investigations. Also subpoenaed Regina Agia. She is slated to become Christie's next chief of staff, and she had been on the Transportation Planning Authority at the time of the bridge incident. Maria Camella is also receiving a subpoena, the administration's director of communications, as is Matt Mowers, a former Christie aide who is now executive director of the New Hampshire GOP. Colin Reed as well, a deputy communications director for the administration, and Evan Ridley, a Christie aide. Finally, the office of governor itself. The subpoena for the office of the governor should allow the committee access to a slew of documents, emails, phone records, and much more. The next group probed by the subpoenas, the Port Authority. Again, no surprise that former Deputy Director Bill Baroni, who resigned back in December, would be on this list and be under subpoena, nor is it surprising to see David Wildstein. More news from him coming up. And the chairman of the Port Authority and Port Authority number 1, David Sampson, is on the subpoena list. His connection to Governor Christie goes a long way back. Patrick Foy also subpoenaed today. Foy is from New York, a Cuomo appointee to the Bi-State Authority. Expect Foy to be a more cooperative witness. And finally, to the Christie campaign, 3 subpoenas here that we know of. Bill Stepien, the former campaign manager and the man who would have been state GOP chairman until Christie slammed that door last week. Nicole Druniak, the wife of Christie spokesman Michael Druniak, and a GOP fundraiser, and the campaign itself, as you just saw. Again, another institutional subpoena here that will yield lots of documents, records, and more information. Still 3 more names we're trying to confirm, but we do know one of them will not be Chris Christie. Chairman Wisniewski saying Christie would not be subpoenaed, at least not yet. Obviously too early to know what any of the people subpoenaed by the committee will say once they are called to testify in Trenton. But there's a lot we do know about them and how they all fit together in this jigsaw puzzle now known as Bridgegate. For those details, we turn to Finance One News' Christy Duffy reporting tonight from Paramus, New Jersey.
We now know names of those subpoenaed in the George Washington Bridge lane closing investigation, and more than half a dozen of them are within Governor Christie's immediate circle. Documents released show Governor Christie's chief spokesman communicating with the former Port Authority official who orchestrated the lane closings. Need to talk to you soon, in person, David Wildstein wrote to Michael Druniak in early December. The two apparently met for dinner the next day, and following that meeting, Wildstein thanked Druniak for sound advice. Druniak responded, "Thanks for a great dinner." Wildstein resigned from the Port Authority the next day.
If Michael Druniak was meeting with David Wildstein just before David Wildstein's resignation was announced, do you think he might have asked him? I mean, I would assume that a line of inquiry would be, when did he, Michael Druniak, find out about this?
Senator Loretta Weinberg is leading the state Senate's investigation into the bridge scandal. Weinberg explains why she thinks Christie's closest staffers make up most of the Assembly subpoena list.
They are being subpoenaed because documents show that they all played some role before or after.
Congressman Bill Pascrell says he thinks the worst is yet to come from the bridge scandal.
People's lives are put in jeopardy, and I want heads to roll on this thing.
Many names of those subpoenaed show up in the documents already made public, and the list of subpoenas reportedly grew when the Assembly Committee hired Reed Shar, the attorney who prosecuted ex-Illinois Governor Rod Blagojevich.
Somebody is not telling the whole truth, and we're going to find out who it is.
Those being subpoenaed could have to testify as early as February. In Paramus, Christy Duffy, FiOS 1 News.
Now, as for former Port Authority Deputy David Wildstein, we've mentioned him twice so far in our reporting. He is once again very publicly offering to tell what he knows in exchange for immunity in this case. However, his lawyer says his phone has yet to ring with a call from the U.S. Attorney's Office, but the response is that if he has immunity from the relative entities, he will talk. Now, one person who needs no such inducement to talk, Democratic Congressman Bill Pascrell, who represents Fort Lee in Congress. He's been an outspoken Christie critic and outspoken on the scandal as well, a trend that continued when we chatted earlier. Congressman, early on in the bridge scandal investigation, you had been quoted as saying you didn't think there was a role for Washington in the process. Do you still feel that way? And if not, what do you think Washington's role is in this investigation?
Well, I meant in terms of committees. I mean, we got 6 investigations right now, and any way to muddy the waters helps not finding the truth. And so the U.S. Attorney's looking into it. I think that's a great idea. Whether this office in New Jersey can do the job with regard to the fact that there are many folks who work very closely with our governor when he was a U.S. Attorney. Maybe we should move it to another venue. That's one of the things that be considered. But you're going to find out more locally in state than the federal government having committees down in Washington that wind up to be theater occasions.
Now, Congressman, your district includes Fort Lee. You know a lot of the people who are involved in all of this, a lot of the names that have come up. I'm wondering if you think there's any way this issue, this thing with the bridge, could have started and ended with Bridget Kelly, or if it had to have gone past her.
I find it difficult to believe that it started and ended with Bridget Kelly. I think she's a loyalist. She's good at what she does. But I certainly am not capable at this time to wrap this all around Bridget Kelly. My gut tells me that she wasn't the precipitator, but there was planning. We see the emails that go back into August. There was planning for this. This was a conscious thing that put people's lives in jeopardy. And that is a serious business, regardless of who the governor is, who the congressman, or who anybody is. Secondly, I would advise my fellow Democrats, you make this partisan and you are going to look like a fool. Partisan politics has no place here. Let the investigations be objective. Let them make sure that they come to conclusions, whatever those conclusions may be, and then we can all make judgments. Not good to make judgmental calls right now.
Well, I'm going to ask you to make one right now. You were quoted by Politico as saying the worst is yet to come, or at least that you thought the worst is yet to come. You still feel that way? And what did you mean by that? Do you have any idea what that worst might be?
Oh, absolutely. Well, nobody's testified and said anything. We have one person testified and took the Fifth Amendment, which they have every right to do. So the worst is yet to come because people are going to be talking. People are going to want immunity. You've heard that before. And so whatever they know, we will know. And so it can't get better. It can get better for us that we find out the truth, but it's going to get worse in terms of who was involved and whose orders were they following through on.
Finally, Congressman, you've seen a lot of governors in the Garden State come and go. You've worked with some, you've worked against others. Is this the kind of thing that could have happened in any gubernatorial administration that you can recall, or is this something that really, to your mind, could only have come in a Christie administration?
Well, I look at the two that came to mind first are Tom Kean and Jim Florio. That was not a culture similar to what exists right now. And that is the idea that you have all the answers and that decisions can be made simply with a political overtone time and time again. I don't believe I've ever seen that kind of a culture before, but particularly when those two come to mind, who I feel are really role models for what a governor should be all about. Both of them took heat in their own way. Both of them were never vindictive.
All right. Congressman Bill Pascrell, thanks for a few minutes on this. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you.
All right. So we've heard from the congressman. You know the latest on what's going on in Trenton and around Trenton. When we come back, Andrew and I will bring in the panel here for more on this and the politics, because this weekend, Christie, he will be in Florida with leading Republicans, and you can just imagine some of the conversations behind closed doors. We'll get into that after this.